Most traders don't blow accounts because they have no strategy. They blow accounts because they keep taking trades that only look like their strategy. I'm talking about forced trades. So today I want to break down the real difference between a clean setup and a forced trade because this one skill alone can change how long you last on prop firm accounts. So a lot of you watching have done this before. You see something that looks close enough, you start talking yourself into it, and before you know it, you're in a trade you never actually planned on taking. So that's the exact moment most of the damage happens. So let's get clear on what a clean setup actually feels like. So when a clean setup is there, you don't have to convince yourself. The conditions you care about are present. So there's very little internal debate. You look at it and it's obvious. Now compare that to a forced trade. A forced trade usually feels like this. You're trying to make it fit. You're lowering one of your standards in real time. You feel a bit of urgency, or you're just tired of just sitting there and doing nothing. So here's an example of price action that looks tempting, but is actually messy. So at a glance, it might seem okay, but when you look closer, the quality just isn't there. So this is the exact situation where it's easy to start forcing something. Now here's a cleaner example. Notice how much less you have to talk yourself into it. The structure is clear and it doesn't feel like you're stretching the rules. So the core difference is simple. A clean setup is the market offering you the conditions. A forced trade is you trying to extract a trade from the market. So that distinction matters a lot more than most people think. Here are some real signs that you're about to force a trade. You start ignoring one of your normal requirements. You say it's close enough, or you've been watching for a long time and feel the need to do something. So you're bored, frustrated, or trying to make back a loss. So if any of those show up, the probability that you're forcing it is very high. So what I personally do in those moments is simple. I step away. I'd rather take, zero trades than take a low quality version of my process. So selectivity is not a weakness. On prop firms, it's one of the only things that can keep you alive long enough to actually get paid. So most traders struggle with this because they only focus on the technical pattern on the chart. They never pay attention to the internal feeling of clarity versus forcing. So once you start noticing that feeling, everything changes. You begin to see how many of your past losses weren't bad luck, they were forced trades. So if you can learn to tell the difference between a clean setup and a forced trade, you remove a huge amount of unnecessary damage from your trading. That's one of the real edges that doesn't show up in a strategy PDF. If this resonated with you, subscribe. I post regularly about the practical side of trading, prop firms, the parts that actually determine whether you last or not.